With the first round of the playoffs in the books, the stars of the NASCAR Cup Series run down a dream this weekend in Loudon, New Hampshire for the 33rd running of the Mobil 1301 at New Hampshire Motor Speedway. The first round saw the eliminations of Hendrick Motorsports' Alex Bowman, multi-time Australian Supercars champion Shane Van Gisbergen, Daytona 500 winner Austin Dillon, and Wood Brothers' Josh Berry, leaving a dozen drivers to battle it out for the Bill France Cup. After Joe Gibbs Racing stormed through the first round with wins by each of their playoff drivers, the second round provides more variety. Loudon's flat 1 mile oval opens up the round before the series heads to the progressively banked Kansas Speedway prior to the cutoff race at the ever-daunting Charlotte Roval. This round seeks to trim the fat off of the playoff grid, casting aside the pretenders in favor of the true threats to the NASCAR Cup Series crown. The Magic Mile shapes up to be a good test of strength for the remaining championship hopefuls. 301 laps over 301 miles tends to get the best of even the best drivers in the field as they vie for a chance to hoist one of the most legendary and most delicious trophies in all of sports, Loudon the Lobster, a massive crustacean that goes to the winner of the event. With an automatic berth to the next round on the line for the 12 remaining playoff racers, the Magic Mile is certain to grant someone's wish for New England notoriety and strike down others that step over the line. Welcome to New Hampshire and the round of 12.
Thank you so much, Tanner Smith, editor from the Pit Box Press, with that wonderful intro. I'm Joe Samniego, and we have Matthew Bro from GridNetworkTV.com to preview the Mobil 1301 at New Hampshire Motor Speedway. Big thank you to our Patreon investors calling the show, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew, for investing in the Grid Network throughout the year. Link in the video description to invest in us through Patreon. Get your name on the leaderboard and get your name said and thanked at the beginning and the conclusion of all of our programs. And of course, you saw during the intro, we accept super chats. Buy me a coffee. Encourage everyone, subscribe, hit that bell icon, and share your thoughts and opinions with us in the chat room because, gentlemen, New Hampshire Motor Speedway back in the playoffs. I gotta be honest, I felt like New Hampshire not being in the playoffs last year felt a little bit lackluster. Like, okay, we're just going to New Hampshire. Christopher Bell will get the win. But now that it's in the playoffs, I feel like we're going to New Hampshire. There's an extra sense of excitement, and it looked like it could be an exciting day for Josh Berry. He was 10 drivers away from claiming a surprising pole effort, considering how lousy of a playoff start he has had, finishing the last 3 race weekends in a row. However, Joey Logano, the defending series champion, took the pole, held off Ryan Blaney to make a Penske 1-2 effort, with Blaney, Josh Berry making a 1-2-3 for Penske. Of course, Penske, technical lines with the Wood Brothers, Josh Berry's effort. But Austin Cindric, 22nd, not exactly there, considering we had a tight top 10 in qualifying. 22nd, poor qualifying effort for Austin Cindric. And really the only other playoff driver starting lower than Austin Cindric on the grid is Chase Elliott. Tanner, is Penske at that level of Joe Gibbs Racing for potentially having one of their drivers in victory lane on Sunday?
Joe, remember a few weeks ago when everybody was trying to put dirt on the Penske grave already? Well, they aren't dead yet. They are very far from dead. It looks like Roger Penske and his crew are ready to tackle the round of 12 with a tenacity that hasn't been seen, well, since the last 3 years that they've been in the playoffs and have taken the title. Obviously, Joey Logano kind of survived the first round. Obviously, same thing could be said for Austin Cindric, but Ryan Blaney very clearly put himself in great position throughout all 3 races in the round of 16 to get himself moving forward into this round, and it looks like all 3 of the remaining Team Penske proper cars are looking to obviously keep going forward into the round of 8. And I can't say that this round doesn't shape up well for them. You go back and look at Ryan Blaney at Kansas, look to be maybe a lap away from winning that race. You look at the Roval where he won the inaugural event, obviously under very interesting circumstances. And just in general, his performance at New Hampshire has largely been very, very good outside of last year's result where he got wiped out on a late restart by Michael McDowell. So, with all that said, I definitely wouldn't be surprised to see a Team Penske car in victory lane. You look at Cindric, I think that he'd be higher up on the grid had he not gotten loose in turns 3 and 4 on his qualifying lap. You look at Ryan Blaney, obviously with a strong record here in the past, and Joey Logano. This is not only the site of his first win, but it's pretty much his home track, hailing from Connecticut. So I think with a very large New England presence in attendance here at New Hampshire this weekend, Joey Logano is certainly going to try to put on for his hometown faithful, but don't be surprised if Ryan Blaney goes out there and steals the lobster out from under his nose.
Yeah, and it's funny because you mentioned New Hampshire being in the playoffs and that excitement, and then next year they take it back out of the playoffs again. So I don't know what they're doing with the schedule. But for Penske, I think this is a prime example of why certain stats don't matter too much. And the reason why I say that is there's been 46 drivers that have raced a next-gen race at New Hampshire. And 22nd, 23rd, and 29th are the average, where they sit in the average finish, where it's Cindric, Logano, and Blaney in terms of all drivers. They haven't been really the best here. And then Josh Berry, funny enough, actually has the best average finish because he finished third in his only race here in the next gen era, only race here in general in his Cup career. So it kind of shows that stuff doesn't matter at all. It really doesn't. And it shows that Ryan Blaney is one of those drivers in the field that no matter where you go, he's going to be a legitimate threat. Even if he hasn't been the best on road courses in recent memory, he's still always a threat. Joey Logano is a 3-time champion for a reason. I'm not going to say the reason is the playoff system. I'm going to say because he just knows how to get it done when it needs to get done. And then Austin Cindric, he's kind of the odd one out of the Penske trio, but he's another one that when you least expect him to run well, he is up in the top 5, up in the top 10. And even if he hasn't been the best here, same with the other two I just mentioned, I can totally see them being a threat for victory. And then Josh Berry, I'm not sure with him. He is a very interesting character. I think that 21 car specifically, I feel like the tracks Josh Berry's supposed to be great at, sometimes they show up, sometimes they don't with the setup. And then he's like, you'd be like, oh, he's going to run well at Bristol. And then obviously the car catches on fire. But then you go to a track where he's not really supposed to run well, and then boom, Josh Berry's up in the top 10. So it's all that really just doesn't matter at the end of the day when it comes to the playoffs. It's like a whole different mindset. You could throw the stats away, even though for the next however long we're on the show, I'm going to keep referring to stats to make my points. But it's just one of those things, I think, without a doubt, if you're starting up front with Logano and Blaney on the front row, without a doubt they have potentially the best chance to take down one of those Joe Gibbs Racing cars to be in victory lane. So I'm very interested to see how that's going to turn out here tomorrow.
Tomorrow's going to be a lot of fun just to see how this race is going to play out. When it comes to the Penske drivers, Blaney and Logano, if they have a clean start, I think mistake-free, I think they're going to be really hard to beat. I'm really curious to see what happens with Berry. I just feel Berry, maybe it's just because the way the last few weeks have gone. Qualifies, good to decent. The race, mistake here or there, bad luck, just can't put it together. What a time would it be if he was to somehow pull off some surprise victory? Granted, it will be a race too late for his playoff efforts, but just something to say, hey, we got out of this funk of just having 3 last place finishes, a rough 2025 after Las Vegas, really something to show. It's just still, it's interesting, just the way qualifying went for the Joe Gibbs cars and Toyota in general. I think Toyotas are not far behind. Just taking a look at the top 10 after qualifying, Logano, Blaney are your front row. Josh Berry, Tyler Reddick. Row 3, you got William Byron, Carson Hocevar, Alex Bowman, Ross Chastain, row 4, and row 5, Denny Hamlin, Shane Van Gisbergen. That is a surprise to say in the top 10. And for quite some time, he was up there in that second position behind Berry. So what an effort by him. And I believe, did the Xfinity Series race in New Hampshire last year? I don't recall. So he has Xfinity Series. The Bell Sweep, that was it. Yeah, so SVG, oval where he has some experience. Of course, Christopher Bell, a lot of people looked at him to be the fastest Toyota. That was not the case. Goes to Tyler Reddick, the only playoff driver without a win this season, starting fourth, putting him outside of row number 2. What an effort. He's going to be behind those Penske Fords. 23-11. They got something else going on with the 2 cars in the playoffs. Bubba Wallace starting 14th. Of course, Riley Herbst, rookie season, not exactly having the season he wanted. But overall, they're looking to make it potentially 5 Toyotas if they were to get Wallace and Tyler Reddick to the round of 8, plus the 3 Joe Gibbs. 5 Toyotas in the round of 8, that would be very significant, very not good for Chevrolet and Ford. So overall, Matthew, how does tomorrow look for the 23-11 team, especially with Tyler Reddick 4th, Wallace 14th?
I feel like for them, anything could be better for those two after last week. I think Bell was running well, and then obviously his issue put him in the 30s, and then Reddick was, I think, 15th. Reddick really hasn't had the best playoff run, just kind of middle of the pack, well, a little above middle. He was 16th at Gateway, and then he was second at Darlington, which he had a legitimate shot to win. I don't know if that Berry spin on lap 1 gave him any damage at all, but I feel like the Joe Gibbs cars all kind of ran away with it the first 3 races. I do, however, believe there will be 1 Toyota that's eliminated, so I think from my previous predictions, and even if I know that it's inaccurate, I'm going to stay with it. I think there will be 4 Toyotas in the round of 8. It just ultimately depends on which one has the worst of the 3 races, right, coming up. But yeah, I think with Reddick, he's an interesting guy at New Hampshire. I think once we hit the next-gen era, he kind of got worse at it, but he's still really not a bad driver here. He has 2 top 10 finishes. He finished 6th here as well. And then Bubba Wallace, I think, again, too, he finished 3rd here a few years ago. I believe it was in the DraftKings car, if I'm not mistaken. But he also has a DNF here. He actually has the best average finish of the drivers in the field that have a DNF here in the next-gen era. So I guess that's a pretty good thing. So the outlier doesn't kill his average finish as much. So for them, they just there hasn't been anything drastic in this charter case yet, so I don't know if they're going to perform as well as they have been immediately after that. But I think they just have to go out there and contend. Even Riley Herbst was like 5th fast, top 5 in practice. Again, we'll talk about that later if practice actually does anything at these tracks. But for those 2, specifically Reddick and Wallace, I just think you got to outscore as many as possible. I think those 2 are legitimate threats to be eliminated in this round. And I think if they don't, this is probably of the 3 tracks remaining. It's tough you can't really argue with the Roval. I think this is one you have to watch them succeed at because you're not going to make up as much ground, I feel, when you hit like the Roval and stuff like that. So we'll see what happens with them as well. But then again, it's the playoffs. You never know what can happen with these guys.
Indeed, you don't. With 23-11 coming into this race, I did pinpoint that for Bubba Wallace, this does tend to be one of his stronger tracks. Obviously, in the first 2 years of the next-gen era, he did have 2 top 10s here. Sorry, 1 top 5 and a top 10. And last year looked to be on pace to possibly, keep that streak alive in the next-gen era. But unfortunately, Noah Gragson decided to take a spill and take Bubba and Austin Dillon with him. So that led to, obviously, Bubba's 1 DNF, while Tyler Reddick looked to have had the lead prior to the rains coming down last year, and ultimately still came home with a very solid 6th-place finish. With all that said, you can't really base all of that based on what you saw last year, based on the performances from those teams that I saw in the first round, as well as just the totality of their seasons as a whole. I definitely feel that 23-11 should have a solid run tomorrow. I just don't really feel that all that confident that the cars that they're going to be starting up near are going to be staying up there. And just in general, this kind of race and this kind of like racetrack lends well to someone like Bubba Wallace and Tyler Reddick, guys that are willing to kind of search around and, you know, put their car wherever they need to make it feel the most comfortable and to go the fastest. And if this even remotely turns into an, you know, tire conservation race, because this is a tire that I believe they used at North Wilkesboro earlier this year, I think that, you know, we could be in store for something a lot like Iowa, where you saw Bubba Wallace, you know, on newer tires, be able to carve his way through the field over the final run of the race. I just feel like 2311 as a whole has a ton of momentum right now, and I really suspect that they'll have a very strong run this weekend, probably somewhere akin to how well they ran at Darlington, but probably a little bit less good than that. So definitely suspect that the 2311 team is going to put together a solid run tomorrow, and I think the team that should be on everybody's list for tomorrow is Hendrick Motorsports, but I'm sure we'll talk about them in a bit.
Hendrick Motorsports, they're going to be a team to watch, seeing what's going to happen. Of course, when you look at the qualifying results, we already talked about the top 10. 11th through 20th, you have Michael McDowell, AJ Allmendinger, Ty Gibbs, Bubba Wallace in 14th, and Christopher Buescher in 15th. Kyle Larson 16th, Brad Keselowski 17th, Chase Briscoe, disappointing qualifying effort, 18th. Christopher Bell, even more disappointing, 19th, and Zane Smith rounds off your top 20. Overall, when it comes to this race, I think seeing what's going to happen with these drivers, and especially the 2311 drivers, I feel they're going to have a lot of work to try to get themselves safely into the next round of playoffs. Bubba Wallace, can he get the win? It just seems like sometimes that team comes up short, and then Tyler Reddick just still winless. And of course, there's all the noise going on from outside the racetrack and inside the courtrooms. I have to say, I'm pretty excited just to see how this all going to shape up, and especially the way when you look at the practice sessions, there were only 3 playoff drivers inside the top 15. 3 out of the 12. And when you look at them, William Byron was the fastest in the practice session. Ryan Blaney was 6th fastest. And of course, Bubba Wallace, 7th fastest. When you look at the playoff picture, all of them are above the cut line, but Bubba Wallace is the closest to that cut line. Blaney was the fastest of them all in qualifying, of course, starting 2nd, Byron 5th, and previously mentioned Bubba Wallace 14th. Tanner, with this track,
Logano was fastest. He's still in the playoffs.
Out of those 3.
Gotcha.
So, yeah, between Blaney, Byron, and Wallace, those 3. But yeah, of course, Logano's on the pole. But do you believe those practice speeds will matter come race time, or do you think that window essentially goes out? Because, as you already mentioned, tires, and we got the tires from North Wilkesboro here.
I think it's important to note that tomorrow's forecast for Loudon, New Hampshire is appearing to be overcast and about 70 degrees, which is about the same temperature as today, but with more cloud cover on the racetrack. It will definitely lead to drivers having at least the illusion of having more grip. I think that compared to today, where you still have the sun on the track, especially in turns 3 and 4, where you saw it all qualifying session long, drivers just not being able to put the power down coming out of turn 4. I definitely think that, you know, that'll provide some really interesting battles tomorrow. But at the same time, I feel like having a qualifying session in broad daylight, sun beating down on the track, that's going to enhance the tire temperatures and make the, you know, it's going to make the data not so conclusive as far as to how it translates to tomorrow during a cloudy day. I think a lot of teams will probably be leaning more on how they ran the first half of last year's race prior to the rain coming down, rather than, you know, really leaning into what they learned from today's session, with all that said, I do think that, obviously knowing what lines work best for your car is certainly something that's important to learn for tomorrow. Just figuring out where you need to let off and then pick the gas back up in the corners, that won't really change too much. But at the end of the day, the most successful drivers in our sport today are the most adaptable, and I think that you see that right up at the front with the two on the front row. I know that we talked about them a ton before, but Joey Logano has been notorious for winning the first races at new racetracks. Obviously, went at Gateway, and then before that, the LA Coliseum and Dirt Bristol. Won all three inaugural events there, and Ryan Blaney has shown to be just titanium, strong when it comes to having to make any sort of a change and just being able to be a steady Eddie about everything. So with all that in mind, I think that you'll see the best drivers in the sport rise to the occasion tomorrow, whether it be from data they've gained from today's practice or data from the past.
Yeah, if I'm here again, Google Chrome is kicking my butt. I can't even tell if you guys can hear me. Just let me know. But when it comes to, just interrupt me, please, if I'm all staticky, and just honestly kick me out of the show at this point. But I wrote that question really weird. I want to apologize on my end, and for the way that was written for Joe, I apologize. But when it comes to like practice, as an example, so Logano was the 25th fastest car in practice. That's kind of the way those three were the fastest, and those three were in the top 15 in the practice. But it shows that, for me, my opinion on when it comes to practice, especially nowadays because of the way they do it and the weather and stuff like that, like Tanner had alluded to previously, it doesn't really do much, because if Logano's 25th fastest in practice and he comes out and puts it on pole, and then Ryan Blaney was the only other one, obviously, up front. But then you have guys who are really fast in practice, like Riley Herbst, no offense to him, but he's starting back in the low 20s, early 30s. So it's like, I don't really know if it does much. And I truly believe a lot of it just goes out the window. I think practice is just about understanding the lines and stuff like that, and maybe the tires, but the race day, you're never going to get the same weather. And I truly believe, like Tanner had mentioned, that cloud cover coming tomorrow, even if it's the same temperature, will truly change a lot what we see on track. So it's one of those things where if Bubba's starting 14th because he was top 10 in practice, or Ryan Blaney starting second because he was a little slower than that in practice, even though he was sixth, and then Byron starting 5th when he was fastest practice, I think Byron could be a threat. But it's just one of those things where we've seen guys who have been fastest in practice that qualify 30th, or we've seen guys who are 35th in practice that put it on pole. So I don't know if New Hampshire is just one of those tracks where I feel like it really will matter on race day. And I think we'll know in the first probably 25 to 30 laps who has it and who doesn't. So I'm excited to see that. I'm not excited to when my internet acts up again, guys. I apologize if you guys can't barely hear me, but it's just, I don't know what it is. I have the 4 bars. I got everything. And you know what it is? I do know what it is. It's Google Chrome, bro. I am telling you, I can't do it. It hates me, guys. It really does. Maybe I should talk nicely about it. But until then, I'll be quiet.
Internet gremlins, they're just one of those things. Thankfully, they're working out so far, but definitely just part of being live on the internet. Of course, this is going to be a good race, I think, when it comes to seeing how the track conditions evolve. And that's one thing I was thinking about, seeing Chase Briscoe starting further back. And the track conditions are evolving. He does not have that clean air. He's going to be in much more traffic than he has been recently. Can that team work their way to the front, maybe put themselves in winning contention? I think pit road is going to be very key for gaining track positions with all that dirty air out there. Of course, when you look at some of the drivers starting 21st through 30th, Justin Haley, Austin Cindric, Ryan Preece, Kyle Busch, Riley Herbst 25th, 26th, Eric Jones, Chase Elliott, Austin Dillon, John Hunter Nemechek, and Ty Dillon 30th. They're all going to be battling dirty air, lots of traffic. Restarts here can get physical. We've seen it before. I think they're going to have a really tough first part of the race when it comes to that. And, of course, not too far ahead of them is Christopher Bell in 19th. The only active driver that has won here in the next gen era, and he has won in 2022, 2024. Other drivers who have won here in the Cup Series career include Denny Hamlin, Brad Keselowski, Joey Logano, and Kyle Busch, which Kyle Busch 24th. I think a lot of folks will be surprised if he somehow pulls off a win during the playoffs while not being in the playoffs. Matthew, when it comes to these 5 drivers I just mentioned, which one do you think is going to be most likely to earn another lobster?
Yeah, that's tough. Also, the other guy was Martin Truex Jr., who obviously isn't active. Where is he?
Mhm.
Like, I thought we were going to get a couple Martin Truex races this season. We saw one where he finished, the 38th, 39th, something like that with Tricon Garage, and then he set sail on his boat with his Bass Pro Shop stuff, and we haven't seen him since. So that sucks. I really wish we got to see more of Martin Truex Jr., especially with how good Toyota's been. But I think – absolutely. I truly believe there's 3 guys on that list that I would expect to possibly see in victory lane. I think Christopher Bell is this is his Kevin Harvick Phoenix track, it seems like. This is his Jimmy Johnson Dover track. It seems like he's just figured it out, right? Or his Denny Hamlin Pocono, you could say as well. I think he's one of them. I think Denny Hamlin, obviously, I think he's got like the second best betting odds to Christopher Bell. He's another one, Denny Hamlin, I feel like can win anywhere except in the next gen era on a road course for some reason. And then Logano, obviously, he loves winning the first round or first race of certain rounds, and this is one of them. So I think he could definitely get it done. And just obviously his pace in qualifying. Logano, when he's on, and I think he really will be this week, even if he hasn't been great here in the next gen era. I was talking a lot of crap about his Bristol stats, and then he hit me with the top 5. So my bad, Joey. But for Brad Keselowski, I'm not entirely sure how that team's doing. I just feel like they've cooled off a little, but he is starting 17th, so that could possibly be a chance for him to run up to the top 10. Kyle Busch, I feel horrible for him. I feel like nothing is going his way, and I feel like we're not even talking about him that much anymore. And that's bad when you have guys. It's kind of like Brad Keselowski a couple of years ago. Granted, Kyle Busch is still top 20 in the standings, I believe, or 21st. But it was like Brad a few years where he had like 2 down years, and it's kind of like not fading away, but it's like I haven't seen Kyle Busch be really competitive anywhere recently, and I never thought I would say that. So I hope RCR figures it out specifically for him, but I don't think he's got a legitimate chance at all to win here. And then Brad Keselowski, not really. So I would say of those 5, I think one of them do find victory lane. I think it would be between Hamlin, Bell, or Logano.
Yeah, I think Bell, of those that have won here before, should be the favorite of the previous winners. But obviously, Joey Logano has the best view of anybody going into tomorrow's race, so it's going to be really hard to count him out considering a single lap speed. And he's arguably the best defensive driver in the sport right now, so if you put him out front with a fresh set of tires or even a slightly less fresh set of tires, he's going to defend that spot for everything he stands for. So he's going to put it all on the line and throw everything but the kitchen sink at anybody that's trying to pass him. With that said, Denny Hamlin obviously has a solid shot to win here. It has similar properties to Gateway, where it's a bit more of a staggered difference between the corners. One's banked a slightly bit different than the other one. Much like Gateway, much like Phoenix. With that said, though, Kyle Busch, he's probably lowest on my list here, sadly. As for Brad Keselowski, the last driver on our list here, I do think it's possible with the right strategy from Jeremy Bullins that he'd be able to potentially pull something off here, but I'll be completely frank with y'all, it's definitely a long shot to see someone like Brad win, but I am interested to, talk a little bit more about other potential upsets possibly later in the show. But, I think that Bell and Logano should be tops of the list. I wouldn't count out Logano or Brad, but Kyle Busch, there's just no way.
Yeah, I think Kyle Busch, if he was to somehow win this race, that would be something I think we'll be talking about as the biggest upset of the year, which is interesting. I never thought we'd be saying Kyle Busch winning a race would be a biggest upset, but the way his season's going, that is just not going to be happening. Bill, I think, has to be one of the favorites, but it is surprising to see that Brad Keselowski did outperform Christopher Bell. We know he had a good run at Bristol. It's just, I just don't know if they got something for such long runs at New Hampshire tomorrow. Now, one surprise from the Hendrick Motorsports team, Kyle Larson, 16th, behind William Byron in 5th, behind Alex Bowman in 7th. He is behind the Trackhouse Chevrolets of Ross Chastain in 8th, Shane Van Gisberger 10th. He also had AJ Allmendinger, another strong qualifier for Carson Hocevar in the top 10. In total, 7 Chevrolets are starting ahead of Kyle Larson. And then when you look at Chase Elliott, 27th. Tanner, any concerns about Larson and Elliott's efforts tomorrow?
Yeah, a good few concerns starting that deep in the field, especially if this is going to be a tire management race of any kind. I think that Kyle Larson tends to struggle in those kinds of events, and some of his fans might chalk that up to his dirt racing background. Oh, well, the races used to be shorter when he'd race in dirt. Yeah, but most of these asphalt guys grew up driving a late model where it'd be like 35 lap features. So I don't really buy that as an excuse, especially when drivers like Christopher Bell, Tony Stewart didn't really struggle with this kind of thing, and they grew up on dirt. With all that said, though, I think that Chase Elliott and his steady Eddie mentality, I think that can lend well into a race like this, but I am a little bit afraid that whatever the 48 team had going on with its horrible strategy calls and multiple unnecessary pit stops, I have a feeling that could translate over to the 9 team this round. So I'm hoping that that's not the case for the fans of Chase Elliott. But with all that said, I mean, if they can't get stage points tomorrow, the 9 and the 5, I mean, Larson already had, I think it's a 24-point lead to the cut line. That's going to fall down dramatically if he can't get stage points tomorrow. Now, something that's helping both of them is the fact that they are not alone outside of the top 10 as far as playoff drivers are concerned. But you definitely want to come out of New Hampshire giving yourself a fighting chance at Kansas so you don't have to go into the Roval and go toe-to-toe with SVG at a road course to try to plant your flag and make your way to the round of 8. With that said, given Hendrick's history here, and yeah, Byron was strong in practice for one lap, I'm really concerned about the 3 remaining Hendrick cars and their viability as far as making it to the round of 8. I don't think that these 3 tracks necessarily in the fall set up very well for them anymore, especially now with someone like SVG being in the field. Obviously they are one of the strongest teams in the sport, but they do have their weaknesses just like every other team. And going to 3 straight tracks where they could be in danger of getting bounced, I am a little bit concerned about the 5, 9, and 24 and their viability in the playoffs if they can't perform tomorrow. So I'm a little bit less concerned about the 5 team because it's Cliff Daniels and Kyle Larson, and if they really need a win, they could probably go get it. But the 9 team definitely really concerns me, and that's why I had them out of the round of 12 last week when we spoke about this.
Yeah, no, make sure Grid Network will have a graphic coming up with our team's predictions coming up very soon. I'm almost done with it. We're almost there. I looked at mine. I'm like, I can't believe I said this 4 weeks ago. But hey, I'm still confident. Not really, honestly. I'm not going to lie to you guys. But I did. It is funny looking at all of your guys' picks. And this round, I think all of us are really different this time. So be on the lookout for some shocker upsets coming out of the camp for us 3, our predictions. But it's always concerning to me when 2 of the best 5 drivers this season in terms of the regular season, Kyle Larson and Chase Elliott, just haven't been hitting on all cylinders like it seems like they usually are. I mean, who would have thought that Chase Elliott, who led the point season standings for a lot of this year, is like just falling off drastically like this? I mean, I think I will agree. I think Tanner is one of those people who has said that multiple times, and he clearly is right about it. But like even Kyle Larson, I know we all date back to that Indy 500, and I know he's had some great runs where he's had a couple top fives and stuff, but that's bad for Kyle Larson. I feel like he just really isn't the same, and it's not really good looking. But however, Cliff Daniels is one of the best in the business, probably is the best in the business when it comes to working with his driver. So I'm interested to see how that goes. I am not too concerned considering that Kyle Larson in the next gen era is really good here. I think his worst finish is 14th. He does have a third place finish. And Chase Elliott, again, he's not bad here either. A couple top 10s or one top 10 where he did finish second here. His worst finish is 18th. So again, how I told you guys to ignore the stats earlier, I'm going to say with those stats, I'm sure they'll be fine here. But then again, that a different weather circumstances, anything can go. So for these two, it's a little concerning for Elliott, I think, more than Larson, just because Elliott is already near the cut line. And then starting that far back, as soon as that green flag drops, I think he's going to be either on it or below it immediately, considering Logano was below it. And Logano's going to immediately be starting first, obviously. So I think they got to go points racing. So they got to go after the stage points. And if they don't, I'd be a little more worried heading into like a Kansas, heading into a Roval, which both of those guys could easily win at both of those tracks. But at the same time, will they? I don't know.
We haven't seen a true Hendrick win since, I mean, in my opinion, Larson at Kansas. I mean, half the field was wiped out in lap 80 at Atlanta, and, you know, Elliott had a teammate up there to help him win that race. And then you look at Iowa, which was it had to play out exactly the way it did for William Byron to win that event on fuel mileage. So, yeah, I mean, Hendrick Motorsports has been struggling for a minute, and it's just not looking like there's any signs of it getting any better. But also not really any signs to say it's getting any worse. So, I don't know. You kind of got to take them with what they are week in and week out.
One of the interesting things I heard, I believe it was the morning drive, and I think it was Brad Gilly that was on the air substituting, and he was talking about how when Penske did the crew chief swap years ago and how that seemed to bring results. And he was talking about something just seems to be missing at Hendrick Motorsports this year. And Kyle Larson, not himself since Indianapolis 500. And that got me thinking, if something was to occur and it's like, okay, you only have Kyle Larson or nobody in the round of 8, which I feel at least Kyle Larson getting the round of 8, would they start considering, okay, a crew chief swap before the end of the season? If none of them are in the round of 8, and well, let's just see what happens in the next 4 races. Do you think that's something that might be worth a try, or do you think it's just finish it off and then the off season just look over everything and then decide?
I thought that they did that. I thought Team Penske did that prior to the 2020 season, not during the season.
Mm-hmm.
That said, I don't think Cliff Daniels is going to be Cliff if he's with any other driver but Kyle Larson. So I don't think that that's a recipe for success. Blake Harris and Alan Gustafson switching places, I don't think the 9 team would be very welcoming of that. Like, not the 9 team, the actual personnel that, you know, work on the car, but I'm talking about the fan base for the 9 team. I don't think that they're going to be too thrilled with a guy that's only won 1 race in his career with the same equipment. I think someone like Rodney Childers could be somebody you'd bring up, but at the same time, like, Chase Elliott's rode really hard for Allen in the past and even into this year. So I just think Chase Elliott kind of thrives in consistency and, you know, with people that he trusts and understands. And I think it'd be really hard to get him to want a new crew chief. But at the same time, I'd like to see him at least try something, because clearly whatever's been happening with that team since 2022 has just not been working.
Yeah, and on my end, I know there's rumors about guys like even Randall Burnett possibly being available next season, the Kyle Busch crew. So I'm not sure. Obviously, take that as a rumor. I've not heard a single thing about that. Just to keep in mind, I'm not leaking anything. I really haven't heard a thing just on social media about it. But it could be interesting. And I think all the guys work well with their crew chiefs. And I think Hendrick Motorsports is a prime example of their 4 guys. I don't think anyone else would work as good with those 4 guys, if that makes sense. Sure, Rodney Childers is great. Really appreciate what he's been helping the Kevin Harvick Incorporated and Landon Lewis organization down in the car store. Really appreciate Rodney down there. But he's a guy who's cup caliber talent, obviously, and what he can do. So I don't know, maybe he gets a call up for next season. But for this year, I don't think switching crew chiefs will help at all any of these guys. I think it would actually hurt every single one of them. So especially with Kyle Larson being as great as he did. And then just Chase Elliott. No, he's not winning a lot after that injury he had a couple seasons ago and the suspension, obviously, for Ricky Hamlin. But he did win 5 races, I believe, in the first next-gen era. So it's like they got it. It's in there somewhere. 4, sorry, my bad. Thank you for correcting me. So 4 in the next-gen that first season. So it goes to show that it's in there somewhere, just like my skinniness that I used to have. It's down in there. I just have to find it. I can't, and clearly the Chase Elliott and the 9 team can't find it as well. Obviously, completely different things, but it just shows that I can't say you got that dog in there, but you got something in there that it's there.
Oh, no. Oh, man. He was making a point.
Oh, I lost you. Lost me. I'm sorry. If you
back.
can still hear me, kick or something. I don't know what I was saying. Chase Elliott's team, they have that dog in them somewhere. They just need to find it. That's all I was saying. And I don't know if it was actually 5 wins for Elliott or if it was because of the Pocono DQ Tanner set 4. I'm not sure about that. I'd have to look that up. But that's all I'm going to say until my internet kicks out again.
I will say this: when you get older, it's harder to find a skinny version. It's not as easy when you're in your 20s and 30s. I could say that. And of course, all the drivers, they're getting older too. It's just finding that little extra on the track that they could do it. It's just everybody else is doing it too. And we got some young drivers in the field like Carson Hocevar and everybody. And Carson Hocevar, one of the non-playoff drivers, I think a lot of people have to be looking at 6th place starting grid. Of course, some of the other non-playoff drivers having good days. In qualifying, SVG, Michael McDowell, and AJ Allmendinger are 10th through 12th. Buescher and Keselowski, 15th and 17th, with Kyle Larson in the middle of the RFK sandwich. Matthew, when it comes to potential upset winners outside the playoffs, do any of the non-playoff drivers have a shot at stealing a win tomorrow?
I don't think so at all. I'm very confident that it's going to be a playoff driver that finds victory lane. However, I will say that if it's any of those guys, I think Chris Buescher is the definition of a guy that is really good at racing, and he will randomly – it's not even random. He shows up all the time. It's just very quietly when he's not winning, and I think this could be a track where he just shows up out of nowhere and gets it done. So if you had to pick any of those guys, I would say Buescher probably. And McDowell wasn't, like you said, the practice doesn't matter, but McDowell really had a great overall lap average in practice. I honestly think if you're going to have a random guy, this is a fun fact I want to point out, history. If Ty Gibbs were to pull one out of his butt and win, it would be the first time in, I believe, NASCAR Cup history that a team had 4 different drivers win 4 races in a row. And so if Ty Gibbs could please do something and make history, he's starting 13th. New Hampshire's obviously not his best track. I know we're talking the Ty train. He's gonna win eventually. Tanner and I have joked for literally all season and last season about this. I think he could be a potential guy to play upset. I think he does well at some of the short tracks, Bristol being one of them. But if he can come out and do it here, I would say if you of the guys you didn't mention that could play upset, I think Ty Gibbs could definitely be one of them. But I am truly confident it is going to be a playoff driver that wins this race.
Yeah, I would say it's a 90% possibility that we see a playoff driver come home with the lobster tomorrow. But with that said, if the rain somehow decides to come crash the party and rain on the parade, I think all bets are off at that point. I mean, we saw cars last year that we hardly ever saw up front make their way to the front towards the end of last year's race because of the rain, and they were actually set up for it. With all that said, though, as for the potential playoff spoilers, uh, I think Ty Gibbs has a shot to potentially do something. You obviously got to look at someone like John Hunter Nemechek, who had an exceptional run here last year in the rain. Not only that, this particular style of track does lend well to someone like him, someone that performed well at Gateway on pace earlier in the playoffs. On top of that, Michael McDowell put on a spirited run here last year in the wet, but I think that had more to do with it being on a wet racetrack and his car being set up for wet tires than it was him having a genuinely good run. AJ Allmendinger, that team is just all qualifying pace and no results, so I'm not going to, rely on them to have a good run. Brad, we already talked about, I think, of this group, he's probably my third guy. SVG, it might be a chance for him to have a top 15. I don't foresee him having a solid run, but obviously, as Matthew already eloquently put it, Chris Buescher, this is definitely a kind of race and a kind of track that lends well to his skill set, so I suspect he should run well here. And Carson Hocevar, if anybody remembers, back in 2023, the Craftsman Truck Series made a visit to the Milwaukee Mile for the first time in quite some time. And Hocevar ran right in Grant Enfinger's tire tracks for the whole final run of the race and fell off towards the very end. And if you're any familiar with Milwaukee Mile, compared to the Magic Mile, they are very, very similarly scaled facilities. New Hampshire does have a little bit more banking, but at the same time, I think that a driver that's strong at Milwaukee should be strong at New Hampshire as well. So Hocevar would be my one potential playoff spoiler to look for. Ty Gibbs, I mean, he was one of the few JGR cars that actually have speed in practice, if that actually means anything. So perhaps he could go up there and contend with the right pit calls from Chris Gabehart on top of the pit box. But yeah, I would definitely lean towards what Matthew said, that it's more than likely a playoff driver comes away with the win and the lobster tomorrow.
Lobster playoff win. I think that'll be something where for one of the 12 drivers, that'll be a great way to then the rest of the round of 12 not have to worry when they go to Kansas and the Charlotte Roval. Really, the Charlotte Roval, a lot of people anticipating SVG to get that win. I think maybe that's going to be the best opportunity to see a non-playoff driver win this round. Maybe Kansas, that's good days in the mistake by playoff drivers, because that just seems to be the big thing, limiting the mistakes made during the race. With that said, of course, you limit the mistakes, you got a shot at the win. Well, depending on what happens tomorrow, pick a winner. We might see some changes in the standings. Of course, we got IMSA from the Grid Endurance Performance Index. We have Formula One at Baku. Baku qualifying today lived up to their so-called the Talladega of F1, the Baku Street Course. 6 red flags, multiple cars in the wall, including Oscar Piastri. Interesting grid tomorrow. A lot of folks anticipate Max Verstappen on the pole to win. Who knows what's going to happen tomorrow? And of course, NASCAR Cup Series, the Mobil 1 301 at New Hampshire. Tanner, starting with you, when it comes to the Mobil 1 301 at New Hampshire, who's going to be the car being number one and in the victory lane?
Said his name plenty of times this season, Joe, and I'm going to ride with him again. It's going to be Ryan Blaney in the 12 car coming out of P2 in qualifying. I think that him being up towards the front to start the race, which has not been something that's been fairly typical for the 12 team this year, should give them the shot in the arm that they need to propel them to win tomorrow at the Magic Mile. I am casting a spell that says Ryan Blaney wins at the Magic Mile.
On my end, it's funny. Like my score, I need one more to reach a 70, which would be awesome. But I was joking with these guys backstage how the last 3 weeks I've technically picked a correct winner. It's just 2 of them were in my family and friend league we bet. And the other one was on Grid Network when I didn't get to pick that driver. So I picked last in my family thing again today. So I won't be able to get who I'm going to say now is I'm pretty sure that's tough. I want to be ahead of Kobe. I know he picked, I believe Kobe picked Ryan Blaney. I'm going to with Christopher Bell tentatively, just because. However, I think William Byron is going to be a sneaky threat. I know Tanner made a funny face. We'll see what happens, but I'm gonna go with Christopher Bell tentatively for NASCAR. But you never know. It'll be cool. I'm at 69. It'll be fun to get 70 tomorrow.
Well, for me, I think I'm going with a Toyota driver, and I think I'm going to have to go with Denny Hamlin. I'm not on the bandwagon. I just think Hamlin, his opportunities to get that win are looking pretty good. That team could come up, and of course, they defer the penalty for the pit crew till after New Hampshire. So he's going to have his regular pit crew, but in New Hampshire, he won't. So I think he's going to put in all the chips in to try to get another lobster. Formula One, the Baku City Circuit. You got Max Verstappen on the pole. You got Carlos Sainz in the Williams next to him. Then, of all the drivers, the Racing Bull, Liam Lawson. No, did I say his? I said the wrong driver. Is it I'm having the
Lawson.
Lawson, yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Lawson starting third.
Yeah. It doesn't sound right, but it is right.
Yeah, that's why you're confused. It doesn't sound right.
Yeah, Liam Lawson. I don't know why I was thinking like, no, that can't be. I'm getting confused with celebrities and just had him. But yeah, Liam Lawson third in that Racing Bull. Surprise, Yuki Tsunoda 6 in that Red Bull. That's going to be interesting to see what happens. The Mercedes there, Isaac Hadjar, Piastri, and Charles Leclerc, your top 10. But we saw Leclerc, Piastri, they got into the wall. I mean, overall, I got to ask you, Tanner, I feel like this is the most unpredictable one, even though some folks think it's going to be Verstappen. Who's going to be the winner of the Azerbaijan Grand Prix?
Some people will say I'm punting this week, but I don't care. I'm picking Yuki.
Ooh.
I think this is going to be an insane race, and I think Yuki Tsunoda comes out on top.
I'll probably quit if that happens, to be honest with you, Tanner. I don't. I like Yuki, but I'm very critical of him and what's happened is crazy. So I don't even think he'll get on the podium, to be honest with you. But I honestly would love it. I really would. I think he's one of the drivers that deserves it. I'm not going to pick him, though. I'm going to pick his teammate just because, Max Verstappen. However, it would be so fun if not wishing harm against Verstappen at all. But if he were to have an issue and we saw Carlos Sainz in a Williams up front, we saw Liam Lawson. If there wasn't passing, I told you guys in the chat, I wish this was like a Monaco-esque race where there isn't a lot of passing, because that would be so fun to watch a Williams and a Racing Bull battle for the win. I don't think we will, though. I think as long as they can hold off the McLarens, who will be charging through the field, I think Max Verstappen has the pace on the long straightaways to just take off, and I think he will. So that's who I'll go with. However, it would be really awesome to see a Yuki Tsunoda podium, and I will, like Tanner will do, manifesting a Blaney win. I'll try to manifest a Yuki Tsunoda podium on my end over here.
If we have a crazy race, I mean, I think it'll be a little bit of weather. Looking at it, chance of rain today was 40%. We had that little bit of rain. Chance of rain tomorrow, 20%. Temperatures are looking about very similar, with the maximum temperature and the minimum temperature in that same range. It's going to be a little bit more earlier than what we have qualifying. if we have that crazy, wild, unpredictable race, I'm going to go with George Russell being the winner in the Mercedes, getting that win. So it's going to be really interesting to see how this all shapes up at Azerbaijan at the Baku city circuit, for their big race. And of course, IMSA, they're going to be racing as well at Indianapolis. In the chat room, I saw Adam with his pick a winner picks. Max Verstappen, Christopher Rebel. By the way, shout out to SVG on a top 10 place tomorrow at Loudon. Yeah, SVG getting that good qualifying effort. Definitely worth mentioning. And it'll be interesting to see where he could finish. With that said, let's go ahead and wrap up the show. We want to thank everyone for tuning in. Of course, we'll be on the air approximately 90 minutes following the conclusion of the Mobil 1 301 at New Hampshire. Big thank you to our Patreon investors, Colin Michelle, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew for investing in the Grid Network through Patreon. Link in the video description to our Patreon page. Also, buy me a coffee, YouTube Super Chat. Get your name on the leaderboard. You want to invest that way. And subscribe, hit that bell icon right here on YouTube to Grid Network and gridnetworktv.com for Matthew's Bros articles recapping the race and across social media at Grid Network TV. For Tanner and Matthew, I'm Joe. Thank you for watching today's program. We'll see you next time and enjoy the races.